How do I turn that off? That is whiteboard.
Okay. Hey guys, George Markoski from the Property Show. Welcome to our event tonight. It's great to see you there. Hello, Freedom Fighters. How you going? Now, for those people that are coming live on Facebook in our group, please type in #live just so I know that you're there. And if you're watching the replay, because I know a lot of you people watch the replay, you haven't got time to watch it tonight, just type in #replay, just so I can keep on you and know what you're watching, I know what you're doing, so that I can give you more of the content that you want. Now, obviously, we've got people on our podcast now listening to us, which is not live. Come and join us live in Australian Property Chat, in our Facebook chat, and that'd be great. So today we're going to talk about safe as a bomb shelter asset protection. I've got Adrian Cartland here from Cartland Law. Hello, Adrian, and welcome to the show.
Hey, George, glad to be back.
Excellent. Yes, great to see you back again. And look, there's been a lot of changes lately, and it's been fascinating through this whole COVID experience. But one thing is, most people have got more assets now than what they did 12 months ago.
Yep, absolutely. So interestingly, so I see this in law across a whole bunch of different clients. I'd say 80% of my clients are doing better than they've ever done. I had one client whose business went up 3,500% as soon as COVID hit. Wow. And so I've done a lot of people doing really well. People are really busy. They're focused on saving money, putting money away, using the extremely low interest rates to buy property. The property market is like the hottest it's been. Everyone's really excited. And then there's maybe like 10% of businesses that are were crushed by COVID or that were doing badly, and that this is just like a death knell for them, and that are doing really badly. For example, if you look around the city, every backpackers motel is up for sale. They're all cleaned out.
Yeah, they would be for a while, and looks like we're not going to be traveling for a long time either. You know.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people who have been hit really badly, and the thing that this should remind us of is that, we could be in the travel industry and considering that we're doing really well, and then COVID hits and then suddenly you're out. This is what the famous author Nassim Taleb likes to call a black swan event.
Absolutely. It's certainly a black swan event because it only happened once 100 years ago.
Yes.
and it's a great book, Black Swan, amazing book.
Yes.
Nassim Taleb's got some interesting philosophies. I really enjoy his discourse. It's great.
So and for those of us who aren't familiar with the idea of a black swan, it's very Australian. Australia has an important part in this story. So it used to be through Europe, Asia. They used to think that swans were all white, that there was no such thing as a black swan. And if you watch the movies, you only see white swans. And then when they came to Australia, they saw that native here were black swans. And so that one observation totally changed their understanding of swans. And now I had a client today who lost huge in their investments as soon as COVID hit, and they were doing extremely well. They had a bunch of, they were making so much money hand over fist, they didn't know what to do with it. COVID hit them really bad, and they lost just literally millions of dollars in the space of a few weeks.
It's terrible, which is horrible. And I suppose that's what we're talking about tonight. And the important thing is, one thing is building an empire, right? Which is what we're all about. Because our mission is to empower 10,000 Australians to create financial freedom through property. But
yes,
you might be able to build your empire, but you don't want to lose it over something stupid or from a black swan. Exactly what you're saying. And so, you are an expert when it comes to asset protection.
Yep.
You really know your stuff, and you're part of our circle of safety. And, you and I have known each other for a long time, and I know how smart you are. You really know the law inside out, and you know how to protect people, which is great.
Yep.
And we get asked this question over and over again because we've got, thousands of followers all around Australia. And one of the main questions I get is, but if I buy a property, how do I keep safe? And my answer to that is, one, make sure you use a tried and tested system like our Markoski method, right? And because if you use a tried and tested system and you find a property in the top 100 and then you do a cash flow calculator and you can afford it, and all those things are going to keep you protected financially. But then what about asset protection? What about outside of investing? Like, for example, you know, if you've got a risky job or you're a business owner and things like that.
How do you prevent against black swans in your life? You know, how do you prevent or deal with like something terrible happening to you? And the most important thing is to remember that bad things happen to good people regularly. And so you might be, you know, if you look at someone and go, their life is doing so well, you know, maybe they're just showing it on the outside. They've probably had a bunch of bad things happen to them. And if they haven't lost it all, it's because they have protected themselves. So let me imagine this. What would happen if so let's just say you've got a husband and wife. What would happen to your properties and your other investments and your assets if your husband went bankrupt? Now you say, well, how do you go bankrupt? Well, I've actually over the last 12 months, there's been an extremely low rate of bankruptcy, basically because there's been all this government incentives and change in bankruptcy rules. That's all finishing. That all finished as of 2 weeks ago. Now there's a whole bunch of people, like a whole bunch of businesses out there that are sitting there. They're like zombies. They're dead, and they just haven't been flipped over. There's a whole bunch of people that could be that are going to be tipped over, and you could be tipped over too. Now, what happens if you're running your business and it's doing really well, and then suddenly you get a lawsuit from an employee? You get a lawsuit from someone who, you know, trips over the front of your business. You know, there's those things still happening, like a negligence lawsuit.
I mean, to give you an example, I know a guy in Sydney, a good friend of mine, and he had a really, really big business. They had big government contracts, and they took over the business, and they were kicking ass. You know, he was buying Lamborghinis and Ferraris and living it up and having a ball, right? And the government contracts kept coming in and they were like cleaning up. Anyway, what happened was they had the government contracts coming in, but sometimes the government can be slow to pay. But what they were doing is expanding, and they bought a factory overseas and they started doing all that sort of stuff. And even though they were profitable, waiting for the money to come in, but spending too much money out, guess what happened? The whole dominoes all fell over.
Yeah.
And he went from 20 million to zero. Including they came and took his house, took his mobile phones, took everything. Yeah,
20 million to zero. That's terrible. Like, like I've seen this at even at small levels. Like, I had a client who had a pizza shop, or let's call it a pizza shop. And they made a GST. It wasn't a pizza shop, but we're going to call it a pizza shop because I don't want to identify them. But it's, you know, it was a food shop. You know, like so not some, you know, crazy like fancy business that was doing exciting stuff. And they made a small GST error. They had good, good accountants. They just made an error, and they made this error for years. And then one day the the tax office comes knocking on their door and says, "You've made an error. You owe us $275,000. His house was in his name. And he was an older guy as well. Like, he was in his 50s. Like, he was, you know, it was heading down towards retirement. He had paid off his house largely, and the tax office said no. You know, he thought that he had been following all of the rules. $275,000 down, lost the family home.
Wow, that is terrible. That is so bad. So,
so he lives in a small rented house now, and he had, he'd been doing, really successful. He'd been an immigrant, but worked hard all his life, it's really sad.
Yep. So one of the
So,
things we teach our members, and this is what I want to get onto, is the rich do things a certain way and the poor do things a different way. And when it comes to tax, the rich use pre-tax dollars for their expenses and everything else like that, where the poor use post-tax dollars. And that's part of what we do in our program. We help people start using their pre-tax dollars instead of post-tax dollars by using depreciation schedules and ITWVs and other clever things like that. And what happens by doing that, we increase people's income very dramatically in their cash flow, and they can get to their goals a lot quicker. And what I want to talk about tonight is, let's talk about the secrets of the rich and how do the rich protect themselves? How do these rich people go bankrupt and drive around their Ferraris?
Well, there's actually, if he's not someone who's not a client of mine, but I saw them in the papers the other day. A rich Adelaide property developer has done some developments. They've gone under. He's lost tens of millions of dollars of banks' money, of other people's money. And he still has a collection of Ferraris that he drives around, and he's bankrupt. The courts took his phone. He has other phones. He has he still has a huge mansion, and the reason is that none of these things are in his name. Exactly. That's the simple thing. Like that's the first piece. So somebody said to me the other day, Adrian, what do you own? And I said, nothing. So I do asset protection for a living. I have nothing in my name. I'm not worth $10.
Yep. So have everyone's seen The Simpsons and Mr. Burns? And the canary owns everything, right?
It's exactly how it works. Yeah.
Yep.
And so the first rule is that if you are at risk of being sued, then you should not have anything of value in your name, or nothing that you care about. I have a laptop and a phone in my name, and I don't really care about that. Exactly. Let's just now, who's at risk of being sued? Anyone who runs a business, anyone who is a director of a company, anyone who's a professional, anyone who has a family who could go into a dispute. So now, if you have no family members who argue, if you have, you're not going to get divorced, you're not running a business, you're a teacher, and you're not married, and you don't have any children, and all your relatives have passed away, and you look after your cats at home, you have no risk of being sued. You do not need to worry about asset protection.
That's not going to sue you, and your retention features don't going to get sued. So basically, if you've got a job that's very safe, that doesn't include any risk. So therefore, anyone that's highly trained, funny enough, doctor, lawyer, all those high-end jobs are very, very apt to get sued, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's all sorts of ways that you wouldn't realize that you can become at risk, even if you're just an ordinary employee. For example, did you know that breaches of workplace rules can not only be enforced against directors, but anyone who's responsible for them in the organization? So it could be someone in HR, or maybe you're just a manager. Wow. And you have caused a breach of rules, or environmental legislation. So if you're working for a company and they cause an oil spill or some kind of damage, which can be quite broad, there can be absolute liability. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. Liability on the people who the government deems to be responsible. Or the tax office could say you're a director, or maybe you just have too much influence in the company, and so therefore you're a shadow director. And then it turns out the company has made a GST error or hasn't paid its superannuation on time, and you get a director penalty notice, and you become personally liable for all of that tax.
Wow!
And I've seen this. I've fought that in court. That exact matter. A guy was so a young guy. He's probably in his 20s. Good knockabout bloke. he began working with this business that was sort of in the built things, doing things with his hands, and he was exceptionally good. And they promoted him. They gave him staff to look after. They said, you can you look after, he had a business mind. Can you look after the accounts? Like, this is fantastic. His career was doing so well. He's not an employee. He wasn't an owner. Like, he was an employee. He wasn't an owner. He was like, I don't have these problems. Then it turns out the owners were funneling money off to another business, secretly stealing all this money from this business. The business that he was working in went under. Then the tax office said that because he was a senior person, he was a shadow director, and issued him with he had to pay for their debts.
And they're the ones stealing it. Wow, amazing!
They stole the money. Yep.
Wow.
So,
great,
fortunately for him, I'd been working with his father for a long time beforehand, and we had set up his family house, in a discretionary trust.
Yep.
So he got sued, and he went bankrupt, but he didn't lose his house
because he didn't own it.
So
That's
exactly
right.
He didn't own it. Now, of course, the simplest way of not owning something
Before we go ahead,
is
Adrian. Just 1 sec. Guys, anyone watching, we're going to do a quick Q&A at the end. So I'd like you to type in your questions as we go along. Our team will be answering and we're reading it out to us at the end. And hopefully we can do some rapid fire questions, Adrian, and get some real nuts and bolts. But now we're going to get into the whole structuring of things. And let me know when you want to share your whiteboard, and so we can show people how this works.
Sure. So let me start with the absolute simplest type of asset protection. I bought a house recently. Well, I didn't buy it. My wife bought it. She's she works in a hospital. She doesn't do anything risky. She doesn't do any businesses. She's never going to be sued. And between the two of us, I'm the one who's a professional. I'm a lawyer, so I'm at risk. I'm a director of a number of companies, so I'm at risk. That what that cost me to put it in her name? Nothing. It's the simplest thing. So you first of all, you're going to start and say, if I'm going to buy my first house, pick one person to own it. Now in South Australia, if you change your mind, you can actually change it between your spouses. So if later on I said she wants to pass it to me, she could move it over to me without stamp duty. We're not going to pay tax on it, it's our main residence. So there's no tax detriment.
Yep.
It means that she signs off on things. You know what? How much that cost her? $0.
You have to ask about that though. The challenge is, as you protect yourself, you sometimes lose tax deductions.
Correct. Yeah. So
that's why we sort of get that balance in between, because obviously, if the person earning the most money is at the most risk, but they're the ones getting the most tax deductions when it comes to buying a property.
Yeah. So, what you can do is then you're going to want to have things in a trust, and let me tell you a story about the trusts. And actually, the invention of trusts relates to property. What used to happen in the Crusades? Knights would go off to the Crusades, and they would have their castle, their property at home, and they want someone else to look after it for them. And so trusts were created and invented in this time so that someone else could hold property for them and the benefit of their children, and protect them and their assets while they're away fighting in the Crusades. So trusts have 500-600 years of history based on protecting assets for other people. So
there you go.
The simplest. I'm sorry.
That's really
So the simplest thing to do is what's called a discretionary trust or a family trust. And so what that is there is no one in particular who owns it. So I could buy, you could buy an investment property. I've been talking to George and saying, maybe you can help me buy an investment property. And what I'm going to buy this in, because I bought my first property in my wife's name, investment property is going to be in a trust's name.
Do you mind opening up the whiteboard so we can show people how this looks?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. It's fascinating because obviously we've got the trust and the trustee and all that. And I'd like to just show people how it's layered and how it looks to give you a visual, people a visual.
Cool. Now, can we see?
Okay, someone just mentioned.
Can we see the whiteboard?
In setting up a trust for assets from my name. Definitely need this, as I was not protected a few years back and lost a lot to an ex. There you go. So that's Kathy just mentioning that she really needs to set up a trust.
Yeah, lost money to an ex. Yeah, the first thing you should do when you're in a relationship is write down what you each start off with, what you're each contributing, what you have, and then that way you can at least see who's contributed what. If you can, then go in and then negotiate. Who gets what if you split up. No one likes to talk about that. It's not a pleasant idea. But 50% of relationships and marriages end in divorce. So it's something that you should always be considerate of. So, but let's just go through a trust. So I'm just right here. We call this a family trust, and that's because it is for the benefit of your family. It is for looking after your family. And a family trust is going to own the house that you want to own and protect. And then you are over here. Now, family trust is going to have a trustee, which is like the person who looks after the property while you go away to the Crusades.
Yep.
Looks after your castle, and then you have an appointor, who is the person who can change the trustee. So now, why does the trustee? Now you say, but who owns this? Well, actually, no one owns it. The trustee, they own it for the benefit of your family. Now they can't. Yeah, that's it. There's going to be a beneficiary. It's going to be you. Now that your spouse, your children, etc. Now, any person in here can get the benefit of this. So if it's making rental income, you can get that. If it make capital gains, you make profits as it appreciates in value over time, you guys get that. You get the 50% capital gains tax concession. So you can, but let's just stay on asset protection before we get on to
quick tax question while we're here.
Sure.
So let's say, for example, it's a brand new property. We're depreciating the property. Yep. Can this person, the beneficiary, can they get a tax deduction on that depreciation?
Not that you can't negatively gear into a family trust.
Right.
Okay, but there is some more complex trusts that we can do where you can negatively gear.
That's right.
So you can.
We need that. We need to take advantage of the whole negative gearing to make.
Yes, correct. And so now, if you've got a positively geared property, putting in a family trust like this, very simple. Like this is a trust like every accountant in the country knows how to use how to use this. It's not complex. Banks often understand it. I've got to say, banks can be pretty stupid. That's why you need someone like George to be able to help you understand how to navigate them. But yeah, so this trustee, they're going to distribute all of the profits, the income, to someone in your family group. Now, let's just say you've got the husband's on, say, $80,000 a year, and the wife, she's working part-time, and so she's only working half-time, so she's on $40,000 a year. Now, what we can do is, because we can choose who gets, let's say, how much income might you make off a property that's they just burst, say $10,000.
let's say it's a $500,000
Yeah.
property. They're getting 25 grand a year, $10,000 profit.
Cool.
Perfect.
Yep, $10,000 profit. Yep. All right. So now, if this was in the husband's name, he'd be adding $80,000 plus $10,000 as his total taxable income. And so he's going to be paying, about 32.5% tax on this. Now, his wife, though, she's going to be on a much lower tax rate, about in the 20s. And so she's going to move her tax up from $40,000 to $50,000. So you're going to make a huge tax saving there. And now you can change this every year, depending on what's the best way of distributing it. Whoever is the best person from year to year. And now let's just say the husband, he goes bankrupt. Okay, what happens? The trust that the property is owned by the family trust. It's not one of his assets. You can't touch it. But let's compare this with a typical purchase by a husband and a wife. In their joint names, they purchase the property. You know what happens if the husband goes bankrupt?
They lose the
trustee doesn't take. Yeah, he doesn't take 50%. Takes 100%.
Yeah.
So, or he's going to attack 100%. So that's bad. So the first thing I'd do, like when I'm looking at asset protection, I see husband and wife with assets in their name. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say you're going to transfer all of your assets to your wife, because if you go bankrupt, and now I'm saying husband, and I say this because 90% of bankruptcies are men. Men take risks, are often more are involved in more risky businesses, and maybe they just make bad decisions when they're not listening to their wife. So, but that's just the fact of the matter. And so most bankruptcies, the typical case, there'll be it's the husband who goes bankrupt. And meanwhile, the wife often knows nothing about this. I've seen so many cases, the wife doesn't know about how bad the husband's business is going until the trustee in bankruptcy is knocking on the door.
Yep, I've seen that on occasion with people, definitely. That's true. Now, I heard a story about there was this footballer in Queensland, and he was making all this money. They bought this house worth millions of dollars, and he started investing in all these different businesses. And because he was a footballer, he didn't really know a lot about business. He was just throwing money in there, and I think he was buying horses, actually. Anyway, he ended up buying all these horses and losing everything and going broke. However, his tax lawyer got him to create a certain trust structure, a bit more complicated than a family trust, but something similar, before he started all this. And what happened was they came in and they took the horses and stuff, but they couldn't touch his house. And he still had this $5 million house on the Gold Coast, and really that saved his ass. That one little thing he did that he listened to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So if you come and do asset protection ahead of time, it's really not that expensive or difficult to do. Like, just these two things here, like, $1,000, setting up advice, whatever, setting up the trust, $300. Get some advice along with it. Maybe you get some, accounting fees along there. Not difficult at all. What's really difficult is when someone comes to me and says, I've gone bankrupt, and what can you do? Or it's a couple, the tax office is knocking on my door, and I've got 3 weeks. What can I do? Very, very hard, because that a trustee in bankruptcy can undo transactions you do 6 months, 18 months. So if you say, I'm about to go bankrupt and I'm going to transfer assets out of my name into my wife's name, trustee in bankruptcy, they just reverse it like it never happened. So Maybe I'll just go on to a bit more of an advanced trust.
I've got a few questions. So I just want to address a few of the questions in the group.
Sure.
So people are saying, can you talk about getting a loan for a trust instead of your own name? We can talk about that, but what I'd like to do is get David, our finance guy, to talk about that. Also, someone said, I'd love to find out more about the negative gearing trust. And we're going to talk about that in the inner circle and go through that anyway.
Sure.
So,
yep.
This is Australian Property Chat. What we're doing is just giving people a basic understanding here. We're going to go into more complicated stuff in the inner circle for all the group members afterwards anyway.
Yes. Yep. So there are trusts that you can do. You can get negative gearing for. There are trusts that we can call bloodline trusts that are only for the benefit of, or the capital. So like the house itself is only for the benefit of you and your blood descendants, your children and their children, and so can't be taken, can't ever go to a creditor. Then there are in South Australia, we've had a new land tax regime. I've created special new unit trusts to purchase property in for land tax purposes, and in particular to try and get trying to get multiple things where you get your main residence capital gains tax exemption, your main residence exemption from land tax, and hold it in a trust so you've got asset protection, and also enable you to take money out of a company that is related to you without paying top-up tax and doing that. But that's in the pretty more complex field. So, but what about I show you something that's quite easy to do? And so things are really easy if you come and say, I'm buying a property, what do I do? And you might have your first property in your spouse's name. Now, then you probably want to buy properties in discretionary trusts. Right? Just as this is the rule of thumb.
Yep.
If I don't know anything about your circumstances, that's what I generally suggest. And that's not a bad position as well for South Australian land tax. I've actually got a land tax calculator that's free to use on my website, cartlandlaw.com. You can plug in all of your details, like the properties that you've got, and work out how much land tax you're going to pay. So I build artificial intelligence and technology stuff as well, besides being a tax lawyer. So we've got some pretty cool tools. But let me show you. So if you're doing it ahead of time, very easy. But if you're doing it, if you come to me and say, how do I protect my property after the fact? Let me show you something you can do. So you've got your house, and you haven't thought through it, or you were much younger when you did it, and it's owned by the husband and wife. So let's just say, what do you say a typical house is worth? Say $500,000.
Yep, 500K. It's a good number.
Yep. And
Melbourne, Sydney, 1 or 2 mil.
Yes. So let's just say you've paid it down, and you've got $200,000 worth of equity, and you've got a $300,000 loan here to the bank. Okay. So now what we can do is, again, we bring in trusts. So we're going to set up a family trust. Sorry.
What I like about this system is this is the way you can actually protect yourself, have your cake and eat it too, and still negative gear.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes.
This is what I
yeah. So what you could do is you could transfer this property from your name into the family trust. Now, the problem with that is it's stamp duty. Yeah, you're going to have to pay stamp duty. It's bad. Yep. So what we're going to do instead is your family trust is actually going to is going to lend you $200,000. Yeah.
Yep. All the equity.
It's going to draw a check for you. And then in return for that check, it's going to take a mortgage over that property. and then you're going to take this check and you're going to contribute it back into the family trust. And there's a couple of ways of doing this, but ultimately it ends up in the same way.
Yeah, so you're moving the paper around, but at the end of the day, that way, if someone sues you, there's nothing to take.
Correct. Yeah. So there was when you're talking about a Queensland case, the one actually I thought you were talking about. Actually, I can tell you the name of this. This is a case called Russos, and it's about 5 years ago, and a guy had exactly this happen. And in fact, he actually did this with a bloodline trust. And so that was just for his family. And he'd done this exact same scheme, and he'd gone bankrupt. If I remember correctly, he'd gone bankrupt, and he had divorced from his wife. And so she was very angrily chasing him. And so the fight was about this bloodline trust. And so he had done this exact same scenario. He had protected himself from his bankruptcy and his creditors. So this is very common. I think it's easier if you do it in, and it's slightly safer if you always have the property in the family trust from the beginning, because that way, if it goes bankrupt, then there's no assets in his name at all. It's just not even a question.
Yep. So just to clarify things, you said someone did this and actually worked?
Yes, totally. This has worked dozens. I've seen this work. I literally have 3 clients that I'm helping at the moment who have this scenario, and they are fighting. Now one of them had this set up. They set it up themselves. They drew some loan documents themselves, and then went to conveyancer and said, "Oh, can you register as a caveat?" And they didn't do all the documents correctly, and so the trustee in bankruptcy is trying to push against it. The other 2 were drawn up properly.
You wouldn't want to do a homemade job on this at all. Look,
no. Well, you know what? It is a couple who have. So the husband's gone bankrupt. The wife had received a bunch of inheritance money. The property is worth about $700,000. The wife had or the land, it's kind of a bit rural, so the land is probably worth $200,000 or $300,000. They built a lovely country home on there using the wife's money from her late father, and so this was inheritance money, and so they built this house on there, and then she had then drawn some loan documents herself. And then she drew another set of loan documents. They just, back of the envelope, wrote it down, or they typed it up and everything. But then they went to a conveyancer and tried to register a caveat when the husband's business started doing bad. Wasn't doing well, and now they've actually had a 2-year fight about the wife's loan in there because the loan wasn't well documented. It's not hard to document this. I just want to say, it's a very simple thing.
Yep.
But if you know what you're doing, I have done dozens and dozens of these. It is not hard. I can do them in my sleep. The wife, this one, they had done it themselves. This is, how do you properly grant a mortgage? How do you properly explain that you have granted this money? How do you send it around to a family trust? It's not hard. But if you're not a lawyer, these clients have technically had problems with that. I'm hopeful that I can help them, but it's cost a lot of money. It's cost tens of thousands of dollars to fight with a trustee in bankruptcy who's trying to defeat their mortgage.
Yeah, so look, the key takeaway here is preparation is the one thing you really got to do, because if you set this up from the beginning early on, it's going to make a big difference. Now, what I want to do, guys, because we're going to be ending soon, because we're going to go to the inner circle, so we only got another 10 minutes to go. But what I like to do is we're going to be handing out a workbook, so you can do a bit of a workbook. It's going to have Adrian's details on there as well if anyone needs his details. So type in #workbook if you want us to send you a direct message, and that way we'll send you the workbook. And on the workbook, we're just going to give you a little one, what you need to do is list your assets, I would say, and find out what you've got that is possible to get sued for, correct? But then
Yes.
what we're going to do is look at how high rating you are, because, what do you do for a living? If you're a business owner or you're a professional or someone with high income, you need to protect yourself. But if you're a teacher or a police officer or something, maybe not, I don't know.
Exactly. That's the turns out my cousin's a cop and he's married to a teacher, and so I was actually using this example of a teacher and a teacher and a cop. They're very unlikely to be sued. They're unlikely to make any tax mistakes. They're unlikely that they're also generally conservative type people as well. So they're unlikely to take on lots of debt. So even if you are in a secure business, a secure profession, like just say you're a teacher, if you are a risky person and you go off and you get lots of credit cards, you get you run up bills, or even if you make some bad life decisions, like if you end up with a partner, what about I've seen this lots of times. A partner has a gambling addiction, and you end up with an STD, sexually transmitted debt.
Wow. All right. Worse. They're terrible. Now, I can't see all the comments for some reason, because we had a few comments before, but if one of the team want to just message me and send me a private message so I can read some of the questions out, that'd be great. But anyone that's a member of Black Belt, you guys can join us for the private session after this, and we can actually go through more of the nitty gritty and stuff like that. But this is very valuable stuff, Adrian. This is great. So I'm really amazed that such a simple thing can save people so much money.
Yep. So this is what I would suggest. If you've already purchased your property, it means you don't have to pay stamp duty. It is really quite a simple. I would suggest this is for people who have started off with a simple life and then they have become more complex. Like for example, if my wife decided to run a business in 5-10 years time, then I would suggest that we would mortgage up our family home, and we would do this because she's purchased it in her name, and so one of the advantages of this being quite simple, you can get your negative gearing, in the name of the owners. You can, the husband and wife. You get your principal place of residence capital gains tax exemption. You get your principal place of residence land tax exemption.
Yep.
So like life is simple. This is good, and it's a case of balancing, like, how risky am I? Like, is this my third investment property, or is this the family home, or the first one?
Absolutely. So I've got a few questions, Adrian, if you don't mind. A few quick fire.
Of course.
Okay. So Amanda Jane said, what about de facto relationship? Woman has house and 2 kids, looking at getting investment together.
Yes. So what would you do? And so she's in a de facto relationship, and she's looking at getting a
investment together.
An investment together. Well, so first of all, like, for blended families, such a high risk of complications. Now, and I've got to say, like, I've got I've a blended family. I've got my son from my first wife, and blended families can be really difficult because, for example, if you buy your property, what happens if you pass away? Does that go to your de facto, who after a year or after you are functionally living together, will then be treated as your spouse? What happens? Will that property go directly to them? Like, what happens if you buy it together? If you bought it to get a house together, you're joint tenants. As soon as you die, it goes to them absolutely, and they don't need to give anything to your children.
Yep.
So you could end up cutting out your children. if you buy it in your name, now are you buying it with your money? Now,
it's quite a complicated, and also part of this has got to do with your will as well, because
correct.
you probably need to do that as your will. And last one,
You need to think through your will. Now, one thing that can be excellent is like particularly if you're getting money in this scenario, I'd say, for example, you're getting, if her money was coming from her parents, say, we can set this up like absolutely rock solid, like set up a bloodline trust. What if she's getting an inheritance? You get her parents to come along, and they would set up a testamentary trust, a trust that comes under their will, and we can actually set this up as a bloodline testamentary trust, and make it extremely strong against the family law, against matrimonial proceedings, against family law. Now nothing's bulletproof, but like if you have enough time and planning, you can make something like really, really strong. Now at a minimum, I would say, if you could put the put the property in a discretionary trust, or in your name, and mortgage it to a discretionary trust, as I've shown here, and then you can guide. Actually, like if you make a direction to a family trust, did you know that is entirely outside of the Wills Act? That is to say, you can't challenge it. So let me say that again. If the this asset here, this $200,000 asset that's now, which is all of the equity in this property, which will increase over time, that is in the family trust. Now we can give a direction, what's called a wills direction, that forces this family trust to, when you die, to send it somewhere, wherever you determine. And now, like, we all hear these horror stories of, wills being challenged and people spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars challenging wills. Now, but assets in a trust don't form part of your estate. So that actually can't be challenged under the estate.
Pretty awesome. Yeah, so It's really simple. So if you're going to have a will, get a trust. Now, we've got Jeremy Westwood. He said, can trust protect against divorce? Depends.
Well,
when you do it.
Depends. Yeah, it depends.
Sorry,
it depends when you do it. No, that's all right. We've had this chat a few times. Basically, you're an expert now as well. So what, can it protect against divorce? A bloodline trust set up right can. A garden variety family trust basically won't. A bloodline testamentary trust, when money has come from your parents, can. Or so if you're looking to leave money to your children or grandchildren, and you want to make sure that they that asset, that legacy you leave, is protected, like we can certainly help protect against that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the fact of it is, the important thing is, I really think in this thing is, one, doing it early. The earlier you do it, the easier it is, and getting a professional that knows what they're doing. Don't go looking in the yellow pages for just any lawyer to do this, because there's a lot of lawyers there that might have a little certificate saying they're lawyers, but if they haven't got experience at doing this sort of thing and haven't been through this process, then stay away. Whenever I pick someone to do my stuff for me, I want to make sure they've got the experience and they know this in the back of their hand. That's why I use you, Adrian, because you know this really well.
Thank you, George. Thank you. I had a client come to me a couple of years ago, and he wanted to set up some structuring. And he said, Adrian, how much is it going to cost? I said, look, this will cost $1,000. And he's like, oh, why don't you do it for $100? I was like, no, like that's like 20 minutes of my time, like, and it's going to take an hour or so to do, or a couple of hours to do. And it's like, well, look, if you don't do it for $100, I'll just get it online for free. I'm like, well, you can Google search for some other document, but it's not going to work well, and you're not going to put it together. And what was funny, well, and I do feel sorry for him. He then got audited by the tax office, and his free document online has cost him tens of thousands of dollars.
Look, the devil's in the detail when it comes to law. People don't get that.
Yes.
There's no point downloading something online, because the detail is so important. And that's why we need an expert in what they do. You can't get an expert in a different area looking at this area. You need each area of law. You need the expert.
Correct. Yep.
That's not the experience.
As they say, it's the fish that John West reject that make John West the best. I don't do, all sorts of other types of law. I'm not going to help you with family law. I'm not going to help you with, insurance. I'm not going to help you with all sorts of things. I do tax law. I do asset protection. I do trusts. This is all I do.
Funny enough, Adrian, that's why they call me the John West of property, because I reject most property.
I love it.
Yeah. So look, I've got some comments here. Jeremy's saying this is an awesome live. Should do it again. Great information, guys. Lots of positive feedback. It's great. Now, yep. So look, this has been really helpful. And guys, remember, if you want your workbook, even you're watching the replay, just type in #workbook. Our team will find you. They'll send you a direct message and send you the workbook. Now, what happens in a family trust if a spouse passes or goes bankrupt? Who pays the loan?
Oh, so this loan here. So here we've got the husband has gone bankrupt. Now, this is a loan that you can. This $200,000 is a loan that you control. So what you can do is you could call upon this loan and if you wanted to, you could force the sale of this property, or you say it's just simply not an asset. He has $0 value in there. So if he goes now, you'd say, well, what about the interest? Usually what you do with this kind of loan, and this is why you need to set it up properly, is you want to have the interest capitalized. So it keeps growing and accumulating. And then that way, as the property value increases, so too does the value of this $200,000 loan.
Mm-hmm.
And so the important thing is when the trustee in bankruptcy comes along, the husband has no value of the property, in which case they'll say, what can we do with this? We can't sell it, and they'll transfer it to the wife. It's not an asset that they can do, then they can do anything with.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or in best case, like your risk is maybe that your property is increased faster than the value of the interest. And so maybe you're at risk like $10,000,
which is
rather than 200,000.
Exactly. So look, this has been really helpful. Adrian, thank you so much for joining us tonight on our Facebook Live in the Australian Property Chat. Guys, thank you so much for watching. This is great. Remember, type in #workbook if you want a copy of the workbook. They'll give you a little workbook so you can do a bit of homework and find out how much are you at risk, what are your liabilities, what are your assets, and how to protect yourself. Also, we'll send you Adrian's details. We're actually going to go off now because we need to join the Positive Property Inner Circle. These are the people that have paid for membership, and we're going to be answering their questions one-on-one and really giving a lot of value. Thank you, everyone in the general group. Thank you so much. And I'll see you in about 5 minutes, Adrian.
Thank you, George.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.